Welcome to Short and to the Point, a podcast from the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Here's your host, Jessica Kleinschmidt.
Welcome back to Short and to the Point. I love my intro. It makes you think of Nickelodeon in the best ways. Jessica Kleinschmidt here. I hope you're having a great day. Today's an exciting episode. They're all exciting, but this one especially for a multitude of reasons, but mainly because listening to the episode, this one, and if you're on Awful Announcing, if you're on the Comeback websites, you probably are in tune with everything that is going on with sports media. And this is an important episode in regard to that. And it's a unique industry in that, right? I've been spending a lot of time putting myself out there in sports media, and to know that this is my livelihood. It's a lot of my best friends' livelihoods, my colleagues' livelihoods, of course. To know that can be taken away from you in an instant is a tough pill to swallow. And ESPN was just hit with another round of massive layoffs. About 20 members of the talent community alone were let go, including Ashley Brewer, Susie Colbert, who I grew up watching, June Lee, Jalen Rose, Steve Young, all were part of these layoffs. And the list, of course, goes on and on. That's just 20 members of the talent portion alone. And I've personally seen layoffs in this industry when I was working for NBC Sports Bay Area, watching the people that worked very, very hard to create not only a livelihood for themselves, but a really strong career be let go. And obviously this was a different situation. It had to do with COVID. And my next guest talks about some of those layoffs, and ESPN's 43-year long run employee, Mike Soltys, joins me today. And we talked a little bit about everything. You know, this guy started his career as an intern with the worldwide leader in sports when it was a startup. Can you guys imagine ESPN as a startup? And he got hired because he said the magical words, "I'll work for free." And 43 years later, he found himself as the VP of corporate communications. But that was short-lived because he also was part of those massive layoffs. And having him on the show was not only a treat, but I learned a lot, and not just about him, but the industry. And he still remains very humbled and very positive about the future of not only sports media, but ESPN. So here's what he had to say. Mike Soltys joins me. Mike, thanks for being here. Awful Announcing is a big fan, just like I told you. So this is really cool to have you join us. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to this, and longtime reader of Awful Announcing. So, and continue to in retirement. So here we go.
Oh, good. Well, that puts more pressure on us. We'll make sure to continue hopefully you continue to like us. But first and foremost, you know, this industry is a very interesting one, and you had the rare opportunity to be with ESPN for as long as you were, 43 years. Right. Can you take me back to your first day, you know, you're as an intern with ESPN, and it was essentially a startup back then?
Yeah, no, it very much was a startup. It seems really odd today, but a lot of people had not even heard of it. I had the good fortune of meeting Bill Rasmussen, our founder. I was a senior at UConn, in the parking lot at UConn behind their athletic offices, and I needed an internship. And as Bill, and I remain friends with him today, likes to say, I said the magic words, which were I'd work for free. And that's what you needed, particularly back then, to get an internship. And first day was, I remember pulling into ESPN, and there was just the one building. My office was in a trailer. Our PR and marketing departments were in a trailer in kind of a mud parking lot, and not exactly what you would envision for big time television. But right away, you know, I could just sense the enthusiasm in the place, and everybody just behind wanting to do this and make it successful, because people thought we'd fold. We were losing a lot of money in the early days. So employees, for the most part, were pretty optimistic, though, that it would work.
And when you take a step back, because you said you're kind of shocked at where ESPN is now, considering it was a startup, was there a moment where you thought ESPN's really picking up some steam?
Yeah, it became clear in the mid 80s, which was about the point that we started to financially break even, that people were very excited about the college basketball coverage, the NFL draft. but also SportsCenter, which became such a part of sports fans' daily um, media habits, was that people always wanted to get SportsCenter. And even though we weren't in nearly as many homes as the broadcast networks, and at that point didn't have the NFL and Major League Baseball and some other high profile things, there still was SportsCenter there all the time. And that created this allegiance with sports fans, which I think still remains to a large part today.
And, I think of when I first discovered SportsCenter as a little kid, and I still, watch it to this day. What have you noticed over the years from just the different individuals, the different timelines of people, the different eras of embracing SportsCenter?
Yeah, clearly the demand of it is different today because people are getting their scores and quick highlights and things on their phone moments after they happen. So, back in the 80s and 90s, you were relying on SportsCenter probably to be the one place you would see a lot of the great video moments. But you could see, even looking at SportsCenters from 1979 or 80, it was based around what's the most important stuff that sports fans want to know. But then as it emerged, you got into a lot of great personalities that helped build it. Chris Berman and Bob Lee early on, Robin Roberts, Charlie Steiner, then Keith and Dan. And really it keeps going today. There's still a long list of popular SportsCenter anchors. And that's an important part because people, when they're watching television, want to feel like that they like the people that they're listening to. And SportsCenter continues to deliver that.
I think seeing Robin Roberts in the studio kind of changed life for me, saying if she can do it, I can do it. So
Yeah.
that definitely sticks out for me. And from the time you were an intern, you made it all the way up to VP of corporate communications. What was that journey like?
It was a lot of fun. There was always some great experiences. It was a ton of work. We really have been on the clock when you're working in PR in a place that's as visible as ESPN, around the clock, 7 days a week. I just had my first little mini post-retirement vacation, and I didn't have to sit there and stare at my phone and check in on emails and check in on the office, and that was kind of refreshing. But that really was always an important part of moving ahead at ESPN, was just making sure that you were deeply connected with the product, knowing what was going on in not just at ESPN, but in the sports landscape and the media landscape in general. And that has been consistent through the 43 years.
And, after those 43 years, you eventually did have your last day with ESPN. What was that last day like?
It was pretty emotional. It was kind of a 2-month in limbo period, which was great in many ways because I was able to. I had lunch every day in the ESPN cafeteria with somebody different, and sharing stories and catching up, and just so many great friends there that it did afford me that ability to do that. Plus, the kind of reaction on social media and hearing from people with emails, impacting their lives. And I compared it to kind of the Mark Twain thing about attending your own funeral, which was a really nice thing. I mean, amidst losing your job, to get that kind of feedback, from people that you influenced in their life, that you were helpful in their life, but people that were great friends. And so the last day I had ideas of what I was going to do, but late in the afternoon, people just packed into my office, and then were gathered outside my office. And it was a very emotional time, just kind of walking out, carrying my Diana Taurasi and Mecca Okafor and UConn uniforms, ESPN magazine cover, my last thing sitting in my office, which proved well because I could hold it up and block my face from the tears. But it was a very emotional time because I frankly didn't want to leave, and thought that I would work there until the point that I said, okay, enough. And I wasn't yet at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And, obviously ESPN continued to deal with layoffs. Watching all of that happen, what was that like? Because you were part of that as well at one point.
Yeah, it's been very hard, really going back 10 years, with ESPN. The first 30 plus years of ESPN, the only time anybody was laid off for the most part was if it was a poor performance or a show wasn't going to happen anymore, or a certain business aspect wasn't going to happen. Last 10 years or so, it's become, there's still layoffs that are related to that, but a lot of the layoffs are not performance related. And you get in the class of 2023, as the ESPN laid off group all refers to them like we're a graduating class. In 2023, people, Barry Blinn and Pete Giancini and Chuck Solitaro, and the list goes on of great people. And similar in 2020, and John Papa and Scott Guglielmino and Carol Stiff, and then going back 10 years, Barry Sachs, Jay Levy, Dave Miller. I could go on all day with hundreds of names that all had the same thing in common, which were deeply dedicated to ESPN, loved their jobs, did a great job, and yet, they were shown the door. So I hope for ESPN's sake, and I remain a fan and a believer that it's going to continue to prosper. But I hope they can figure out to make their layoffs, the next inevitable layoffs, more performance based than what they have been. That's when people are gone, companies move forward. I kind of get that. And so looking ahead for the people that are there, a lot of people said to me, hey, it happened to you guys, it can happen to me. And you don't really want that as part of your culture. And they need to figure out a way to fix that, to help the morale go up.
And, you're talking about morale, but you could easily have a negative attitude about all of this. And you're saying you still believe in ESPN, it can still prosper. That's kind of refreshing. And I'm kind of in disbelief of it. I would take the petty route, to be honest, but you have a great mentality about it. Where does that come from?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly have had my petty moments the last couple of months. But I'm a firm believer that you want to be positive in life and you want to be optimistic, and you're going to be a much happier person if you hang on to that positivity. I mean, I look back, I had 43 great years in an amazing place, have wonderful friends, had experiences, really every year that some people don't get in a lifetime. And so I remain very positive. And also, I do hope to, potentially do something else next. And you're much more likely to encounter that if you have a positive attitude. So
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that.
And you started saying like you weren't glued to your phone anymore, which was refreshing. You of course became a grandpa. Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
Was it difficult for you? Are you still just going through the motions of checking your phone constantly? Because I know with sports and news, it's 24/7. Are you able to wean yourself away from that at all?
I've weaned myself a little bit. I've watched. I'm a Red Sox fan, so I've watched some Red Sox the last few weeks. But I've mostly not turned to ESPN and watched sports on other networks either. I just really wanted to get a break. I'm a sports fan. I'll be back to it, but really felt that was needed to take a break. It's hard to, after 43 years worth of habits, and my interests are there. So I have liked going to Awful Announcing and see what's going on in the news, and paying attention on ESPN's websites on what's going on at ESPN. I still have that professional curiosity, which isn't going to go away, but certainly not all absorbed with it, and consciously making a point to withdraw from it, at least for the short term.
Definitely, you deserve the break. And also, thank you for plugging Awful Announcing. We appreciate it. And you're watching the Red Sox at the perfect time. They're totally heating up. They totally swept my A's recently. And
Yes.
I think that Yoshida is definitely an AL Rookie of the Year candidate for me. And but with all of this, it's kind of interesting. I know there's some negatives there with the layoffs, but you talked about these memorable moments you had. I know you said the World Cup was one of your favorite things to cover. What were some of those really fun events that you were able to be a part of during your time?
Yeah, in terms of a specific event, I went to 3 World Cup openers, but the opener in Brazil and the opener in South Africa. I mean, South Africa was so close to their apartheid era, and they're hosting the greatest sporting event in the world. And then Brazil just feels that they're the center of the soccer universe. And so what it meant to those two countries, I mean, you could really feel it in the stadium, unlike anything I'd encountered in the United States. But I'm a UConn grad, met my wife, Teresa, 40 years there. I have 4 kids who all went to UConn. A daughter-in-law and son-in-law went to UConn. So you can see a little bit of a theme there.
There's definitely a theme there.
So I attended 14 men's and women's basketball championships for ESPN, including in 2004 and 2014 when the men and women both won it, and within a 24-hour period. I mean, that's the kind of experience that you can't really anticipate you're ever going to have, but courtesy of my job at ESPN, was able to have it. And it's great to think back, and it's great to hold on to those memories and hopefully build some more.
And I've always been kind of curious because we're just kind of in our own little bubble when it comes to sports in the US. What was it like to see sports internationally?
Yeah, it just, we all feel that sports means the most here, but you go to like Brazil with the World Cup, there was nothing like that. You maybe get it, if when you're in a World Series city, or you're in Alabama when Alabama's playing for the college football championship, that kind of thing, that you do feel it. But countrywide in Brazil, you could just feel the excitement, not just about the Brazil games, which naturally is going to be there, but just about the whole experience, that it was all there and embracing it. And similar in South Africa. So I had not traveled much globally for ESPN. And so those ones really stood out and to me seemed different than in the US.
Definitely. And you worked with talent and athletes, and seeing some of them transition into media after retiring, that must have been cool. What are some of your more memorable guests and athletes that you've come across?
From an ESPN end, going back so far, Chris Berman remains a good friend, and Dick Vitale, just heard about and was texting with him the other night on his latest cancer battle. But he's an absolute wonderful person, and I'm confident we'll beat this cancer battle as well. He just cares so much about people, and a pleasure to work with. From a PR end, always did anything that we were ever looking for, and just a wonderful person. My wife is dealing with ovarian cancer. As soon as he heard, he called her up and gave her the Dickie V pep talk of, be optimistic and push yourself in exercise and always stay positive. And, that's the kind of person that he is. I had outside of, tied to ESPN, but, I think about it, like Muhammad Ali is probably the best known athlete in history, and was able to, we had an event in 1999 at the US Capitol, and Carl Lewis was also there. And, and he's by far the second string when Muhammad Ali is in the room, and all these US senators, and Orrin Hatch was running for president at the time, and he's lining up for a picture. We had this thing where you could take a fake magazine cover of ESPN, the magazine, and there's this guy running for president, lining up for that. But I was able to hang out with Ali, and that was very cool. And then Usain Bolt came to Bristol for this is SportsCenter ad, and they did this thing, a contest where some employees could race him, and they did it live on SportsCenter, and that was hysterical. And at that time, he was probably the best known athlete in the world, and to have a race against him was a very amazing experience.
I can imagine, and probably painful with your legs the next day. And you mentioned this is SportsCenter, and that I feel is something that just defines my love for sports and growing up and introducing these athletes as people. I think of the Tim Lincecum and then David Ortiz and wearing the wrong hat, those types of things. Were you ever involved in some of those I guess ads? And do you have any fun stories about those as well?
Yeah, it was great when most of them were shot in Bristol. The whole conceit was that Bristol was the center of the sports universe, and all these people just hung out in Bristol. And so we would routinely see people in the cafeteria or around the buildings. And from a PR end, I worked on them. But one day I got a call, and somebody knew that I had a blue blazer that hung on the back of my door because I would do like local television interviews. And so I had a blue blazer there in case I ever needed it. And I get this call, you still have that blue blazer? I'm like, yeah. I says, you want to be in a This Is SportsCenter ad? We need a corporate suit. And so I came over, and it was the one called Agents, and Davy Jones of the Monkees was the
Wow.
premise was, yeah, he was repping Carl. It was a time that he was repping Carl Ravitch in a contract negotiation. And Davy Jones of the Monkees, through about 10 takes, is sitting there screaming at me and my colleague, Rob Tobias. And so that spot ran a great deal. Kenny Rogers, not the baseball player, the singer, was in it, and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister.
Oh,
So
wow.
go to YouTube, check it out, The Agents. And I'm this network suit getting yelled at by Davy Jones of the Monkees.
Oh my gosh, that must have been awesome. To get yelled at by anybody, I prefer it be a member of the Monkees myself.
Yes.
And
Sure.
over all those years, and to think that you started out as an intern, interns are still alive and well and thriving in this industry. When you're talking to some of these younger people, what's advice you can give them to make the most out of their internship?
Yeah, a lot of people will get this in and get an internship and then be nervous and sit around the office and not sure what to do. And I always right away say to the new interns, I would always say, make this experience the most it can be. If someone's not giving you something, go and ask them. Don't be intimidated. If you're offered an opportunity to participate in something, do not hesitate to do it. Make the most of it, because ESPN continues to bring through a lot of interns, and there's tremendous success that come from them. Woj was once an intern in our department,
Yeah.
so you never know what career path you take, but not just at ESPN, but in general. And if you can't get one at a glamorous place like ESPN, get it wherever that's going to give you a good experience, because you'll learn a lot, but you'll also get to know people that will then help you out, because getting that first job can be so difficult. And generally, after you get the first job, it becomes a lot easier to get the second and third.
Do you remember Woj as an intern? What was he like?
Yes.
What
Oh,
was he
yeah.
like as an intern?
And when I was cleaning out my files, I did find a letter that he sent thanking us for his internship. So was very diligent, obviously a good writer, and we did have great memories of Woj the intern. But I did find I had personnel files that I was cleaning out in my last 2 months, and found a lot of gems like that I would take a picture of and send it to the person, and
Oh,
get a lot of laughs over it. So
I love that. And how do you develop these relationships with people? I mean, just having met you for 20 minutes, I can see it. But is that something you can teach other people? Because in PR, that's how we thrive. That's how we become successful, is those relationships. How do you teach people how to be that type of person?
yeah, you need to be, and I think you certainly are with this podcast. You want to be, somebody's got to be curious.
Mhm.
Curiosity becomes the starting point, but a quality which you have to really think about a little more is empathy, and try to be thinking about things. If you're talking about interns, okay, you have to realize that this person that just walked in is probably scared to death. And
Mhm.
like, what can we do to make this person more comfortable and make them understand that they're going to have a good time, and we're not scary. We'll be very helpful. So empathy, thinking about, and from my end, from PR with media relations, is you really need to think like the reporter. A lot of PR people, it's like, here's the corporate stance, here's what we're doing, and it's like, well, the reporter is working on a particular story with a particular angle. You can very easily research them and know their approach to things, and you need to be understanding what they're looking for. And so that's important for people that are looking to get into PR, is the empathy on that front also.
Definitely. And before I let you go, what are your thoughts on the state of sports media? You've seen different angles of it. You've been a part of different eras. I'm just getting my start in certain aspects of it. It's constantly transitioning. What are your thoughts on the overview of sports media today?
Yeah, the change is just so quickly. I mean, looking over 43 years, obviously a lot changed. When ESPN started, sports was just on the weekend, and then you look at things today. But now, things, you really need to pay careful attention to everything going on, not just at the particular company you work at or where you want to work at, or everything else, because things can emerge, and you don't want to be dismissive. The shortened to the point podcast, could become the biggest thing. And let's hope so, but
Mhm.
things happen quickly now, more so than in the past. But sports is as popular as it ever has been and an central part of everybody's lives. And as the media industry and a lot of the traditional media has declined, sports continues to get that audience. It's splintered, but it continues to get the audience. You could argue it's getting a bigger audience. And I don't see that diminishing at all in the coming years. I think it actually, because it gives us that sense of community that we don't get. Everybody wants to avoid politics because it turns ugly, which used to not be the case. They're watching, they're consuming different news sources. They're watching different shows. People are streaming something, but they don't have that. Their friends don't have that streaming service. But sports becomes that common ground, and that's where it's probably more important than ever in society at large.
And I think that that's what's kind of beautiful about it is, like you mentioned, it's transitioning. I cover baseball mostly. I've seen so many transitions in the sport, but I think the one commonality is, like you said, it's a good escape. And I don't think people, I'm not saving lives. We're not, curing anything, but
Right.
we can make you happy and distracted for a little bit. And I feel like
Right.
that deserves a lot of praise, I feel.
No, absolutely. And it can be something that, you go to the office the next day and talk about the baseball game you saw. And,
Water cooler
ESPN's
news. Yes.
yes,
Yes.
ESPN's right in the middle of halfway between New York and Boston. So the Red Sox Yankee rivalry was the source of lots of conversations over the years. And that's the way it is anywhere, whether it be baseball or the NFL or in really strong college communities. And that's going to keep being strong for the years to come. It will look different, but things look different 10 years ago and look different 10 years before that, look different in the 70s and 60s. So,
Mhm.
but sports continues to be a central part of American life, and that's not going to change.
Definitely. And that's good to hear. I feel like you saying it makes me feel better about it all. Thank you, Mike, so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Thank you, Mike, so much for joining me. That was the wonderful Mike Soltys. I learned so much today, and not just about sports media and the culture and the overview of what is to happen, but the fact that despite being laid off, he maintains such a positive attitude about it all and knows that there's still a future for ESPN. And that was short and to the point here on The Comeback and Awful Announcing. I'm Jessica Kleinschmidt. Thank you for Philip for always putting up with me and doing all the fun stuff behind the scenes. I know it can't be easy dealing with me. Make sure you're following us on YouTube at The Comeback TCB and searching online at The Comeback and the Awful Announcing websites. We cover everything and then some, and we'll see you next time.
Want even more short and to the point? Follow Jessica at KleinschmidtJD and head over to thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com.